Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. On today's video, I would like to take a look at taking your very first steps into Provider. Now, I have a series that covers each one of the flavors of Provider in more detail, but I'm finding a lot of people are still struggling with when they should use Provider, what are the first steps to take, and what problems does working Provider into your application solve? So we're going to cover that in today's video with this very simple app that has a button that will change the values. We have a listener down here that is listening to the values, and then we have another page that is also listening to those values. So we will work Provider into this and show how we are able to set the values from one widget, read them from a widget on the same page, and then also read them from another widget on a completely different page. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm going to give myself a new project by typing Flutter create provider underscore start. Now you can call that whatever you want. Just make sure you don't call it provider by itself, because that will conflict with the provider package. So that is finished. So I'm going to cd into provider underscore start. And then I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to type code dot, and then I'm going to hit a space. I'm going to do the -n flag, which will give me a new window if you have that enabled in your path. If not, you can just open Visual Studio Code and navigate to it with open folder. So let's do a little bit of cleanup here on the main.dart file. So let's go to main.dart. Let's take out all of this green gobbledygook. There. And then let's just clear out everything from class my home page down. All the brackets, everything. So I'm going to put everything in the main.dart file just to keep it simple. And I'd like to start with a stateless widget, which we'll call page 1, and that will be the page that you land on. And so I'm going to make that, like I said, stateless. So I'm just going to type STL and let this code complete that for me. And I'm going to call it page 1. All right, let's go down below that. Let's do another stateless widget, and let's make this one called top. And so this will be the top half of the landing page, and then we'll do another half, which we will creatively call, let me do the STL, creatively call bottom. And then one last widget, we will do STL for a stateless widget. All of these are stateless. We're going to do page 2. So this will be the completely different page that we navigate to with the button. All right, so let's get rid of the error we have up here in the top widget by changing the home page to page 1. So that's where we will land when we come into this application. And let's visit our page 1, and let's, instead of a container, let's create a scaffold. And let's give that scaffold a body. And in that body, I want to create a column with children. And I want to do 2 halves of that page, top half, bottom half. And so to accomplish that, I'm going to use 2 flexible widgets. And the first one will have a child of top, and the second one will have a child of bottom. All right, and with that, I'm ready to actually fire up this emulator. So I'm going to start debugging, and I will continue on while that builds. And so for our top, we can go inside the container. We don't strictly need the container, but we won't bother taking it out. We'll just add a child, and we'll do a center. And in that center, what I want to do is a row, and then we'll put the buttons for set values and then the next page. So we'll do a row. We'll do some children inside that row, and there'll be a raised button. That will have a child, which will be a text widget, and we will call that change values. And we'll give it an onPress with a blank function for now. All right, so we'll add a comma to the end of that raised button, and I want to add a second button, and I am just simply going to copy that one and paste it down below. And that one, instead of change values, is going to say next page. And looks like I forgot a child up here in my center widget. So I'll save that, and I see two buttons here that look a little out of whack here. So I'm going to come above children, and what we'll do is a main axis alignment. And that will give it some spacing. So I'll do main axis alignment space. Let's do space evenly. That will put space around them and in between them and kind of put them on the right and left third of the page. So that takes care of the top of our page. So let's come down here to the bottom, and here we want the title and description text. And so I'm going to come inside the container. We'll do a child, and we'll do center. And I'll need a child on that. And what I want to do here is a rich text widget. And a rich text widget allows you to specify different styles for different parts of the text. And so in the first place, I'm going to give it a text property with a text span widget. And I'm going to specify the style. And the only thing I want to specify here, text style, is the color. And I just want to make sure it's black because unlike the text widget, rich text will default to white, which can be kind of confusing when you're looking for it on a white background, as we often are. All right, so after style, there is a children property. So I'm going to open up brackets, and this is an array into which I can put other spans of text. So I'm going to do one text span that is title. And this is just going to be a placeholder until we replace it with a dynamic value. And I want to put a style on that as well. So a text style. And I simply want to change the font weight. So font weight will be bold. And the next text span, I am just going to do a colon and a space. So that will just give us some separation. And that should be a text property. And this should also be a text property. And then lastly, I want to do the description. So text span, and I don't need to style this. I'm just going to do text description goes here. And I will save that. And so this will give us a space to display dynamically the values as we load them into the widget tree when we get around to that. Now, page 2 of the application, we want to just duplicate this here. We're just trying to prove a point by going to a different page. So I will take this container up here. I will copy it, and I will paste it down here. And then I want to wrap this container with a widget, and I want to put in a scaffold. And I need to change the child to a body. Now I also want to put in an app bar, so we have a way to pop back to page 1. So we'll put app bar, and I'm just going to do a blank app bar just so we can get that arrow. I'm going to Option Shift F, clean that formatting up a little bit. And now that I have a page 2 that I can navigate to, I am going to hook up this button so that we can navigate to that page. So if we slide up to top and go inside of these curly braces for the next page raise button, I can now add navigator of context dot push, and I'm going to push a material page route with a builder and a context, and then a fat arrow to page 2. Let me add some commas in there, a semicolon at the end, do a little formatting, slide that back so you can see it. I will save, and let's just check and make sure that works. So we click next page, Takes us to page 2. We hit the arrow, we can pop back. Great, we've got our framework all built. So we have an object that we need to be able to pass around and to read. So let's model that object now. So if we come inside lib and we do a new folder, we can call that models. And inside that models folder, I want to put a file called info.dart. And inside of info.dart, we are going to do a very simple class. We will call it class info. And this is going to have two properties. It will have a string title and a string description. And I also want to create a constructor because I want to load default values to these when the class is created. So I am going to say title is going to be equal to default title. And I'm going to say description is going to be equal to this is the default description. All right, so that is our model, very simple. Now, our challenge is going to be how can we work within one instance of this model, change it, because we have two widgets here. Let me bring up the Flutter inspector just to illustrate that point. So we have two widgets here. We want to be able to click this button and set new values in our model in this widget. We want this widget down here to be able to respond and read those new values. And then we have a second page where we also want to be able to do the same thing. So how can we do that? Shockingly, the answer is provider. So let's go and get the provider package. Turn off debug paint. And let's go to pub.dev. And let's search for provider. Like I didn't already have it preloaded on my screen. Oh, there it is. And then we can go to installing, grab the version here, and take it into our pubspec.yaml file. And we're looking for the dependency section, and if it's a new app, you can drop it right after the Cupertino icons. You can save. And at this point, you're going to want to stop your application and restart it. And so there I go, and let me pause this while that fires up. All right, so we're back online, and now it's time to work in Provider. So the question is, where can you put these values that every point of the application that we need it to can access it? And so to figure that out, I'm going to go back to my Flutter Dev Tools again and look at the widget tree. And here from page 2, you can see that this goes all the way up to the material app. Page 1 joins right here. It goes down, and we have the top widget, which has our button, and then we have the bottom widget here. So we need to find a converge point above all of the widgets that we need to access that for. And I can see really the only place that I have to put the provider where it could be accessed by the top, the bottom, and page 2 is around the material app. And you will find almost in every instance that the material app or the Cupertino app is really the place that you want to be wrapping your providers so that they are accessible all the way down. You might be tempted to think that with a page 2 situation like this where you are pushing, that page 2 might be a child of page 1. It is not. It is a sibling. And so really the only ancestor they have in common is the material app and the my app and the root. All right, so we've determined that the top level is where we need to go. So let's go into my app and let's wrap a provider around material app. So we can bring in a provider. We need to import the package. So I'll do that there. And to create a provider, we're going to do it with the create property. We put in the context and we fat arrow over to what we want to pass in. And in this case, we want to pass in an instance of our info class, and we also need to import that. All right, so let's save that. Let's look at our inspector again and refresh the tree. And let me go to page 2 just to make it even more clear here. So now we can see we have this provider that is of type info class up here above all of these widgets. This means that we have now one instance of that class that can be accessed by all widgets below it. And the below it is important. These widgets cannot go down to get a provider value. They must go up. And that's why we've put it at the top of our tree. So with that in place, it is quite easy to pull in this one instance of the info class into any widget that we need to. So we look here in page 1 and we really have no need to pull it into page 1 because we're not interacting with it in any way. If we look at top, we can see we want to be able to change the values with this raise button, and so we need it here. And so to bring in a provider, you need a context, so you can do it inside the build method. And so we can create an info, and you can bring it in with provider.ofContext. And this is a generic, and you need to tell it what you're looking for. So you're going to tell it we're looking for an instance of the info class. That is going to shoot up the widget tree and find that instance of the info class. So now down here, when we click change values, we can say info.title equals new title, and info.description equals my new description. That takes care of changing them. Now we also need to be able to read them. So we want to be able to do that from the bottom widget. So we come down here inside our build, and we're going to bring in our instance of the item class with var item equals provider.ofContext. And we specify that we are looking for the info and now we can replace title with info dot. Should be info there. I don't know how I got item stuck in my head there. Info dot title, and then description can be info dot description. Anywhere else? Yes, we want page 2 to be reading these same values here. So I think I'll just copy this before I start typing item again, stick it in here, and I will replace the title with info.title and the description with info.description. All right, so if I do a restart, and I click on change values, nothing happens. But if I go to the next page, I see my new values. So what is going on there? So we have changed the values of our class, and we're seeing them on the second page, but not the first page. What's going on? What's going on is Flutter is very smart, and Flutter does not want to waste resources. So Flutter has built these widgets, painted them on the screen. It is not going to frivolously rebuild them unless specifically told to do so. When we click next page, we are building a brand new page. Those new values already exist, and so it paints those values on the screen. Back here, we haven't given it any reason to change these values. So while we've successfully worked in provider, we still need some mechanism to tell this screen that it needs to update. And that is where change notifier provider comes in. So to use change notifier provider, we need to refactor our model a little bit. So let's go into info.dart, and I'm going to actually comment out all of this here, and I'm going to start from scratch. So I am going to create class info again. And this time when I create my variables, I'm going to create them with an underscore in front, which is going to make them a private variable. I am going to create a constructor just like we did before that does the same thing, only I'm going to set underscore title equal to default title. And then I'm going to set underscore description. Oh, I need a semicolon there. Underscore description equal to this is the default description. All right, so now if I have private variables, I have no way to access them. So we're going to do some getters and setters. And if you are familiar with Java, this class is going to look like a POJO, a plain old Java object. To you, you have private variables and public ways to set and get them. And so we're going to have a string, it's going to have a get property, and we will get the title. And when that property is accessed, we will simply pass out the value of title. And we'll have a string get description, and we will pass out description. And then we'll have setters. So we'll have change title is equal to string value. And we're going to set our title equal to our value there. And then we'll do the same thing with change description. We'll pass in a value, and that will allow us to change our description by setting that equal to the value. That's going to give us an error here in main, so we want to go to top, and the problem is that when we change the title, we can't do that with dot anymore because we don't have public properties. So we want to info.change title, and we want to stick the new title in there as our value. And so we'll say info.change description. Oh dear. Go in there. There we go. All right, so we still, if you come back here, we have refactored our info class, but we still have the same problem. If we change this title here, we really are not telling the user interface that a change has happened. And to do that, we have a mix-in available to us just through Flutter. It's not part of the provider package, but it is called change notifier. And you can bring that in with the material package, you can bring it in with the Cupertino package, or you can bring it in with the foundation package. And change notifier gives you access to a property or a method called notify listeners. And we will want to call that whenever we change a value in our class. So we want to call it here in change title, and we want to call it here in change description. And what this will do, if we revisit our widget tree, this will essentially send a pulse up the widget tree to anything that is listening to it, which can then respond. Now, provider can do that, but not a plain provider. There is a provider called change notifier provider that is built to listen to exactly those kinds of signals coming up the widget tree. So if we change this to change notifier provider, when we make a change by clicking the button, we send notify listeners up the widget tree. Change notifier provider then figures out the downstream widgets that are listening to that value, and it tells Flutter to refresh the UI. So that is the piece that we were missing before. So let's go to main.dart and let's change this provider to change notifier provider. So we go all the way up to class my app. All you have to do is stick change notifier, you do have to spell it right, in front of provider. So now, without needing to change any of these downstream widgets, because they are just simply listening for a type info, they don't necessarily care if it's coming from provider or change notifier provider, we can restart the state. And this time, when I click change values, this changes immediately. We go to the next page and we would expect that this has already changed as well. And so if you were wondering when we created the info class why we created private variables, hopefully that's clear now. If we could just reach directly into the class through a dot property and set those classes, we would be subverting notify listeners. And the case that we've set up, we need notify listeners to fire in order for the UI to update. And so you have to change these variables through these change title, through these change description methods, so that notify listeners can be fired and the UI can refresh. So that is a primer on working provider into your application. You've seen here, you can use plain old provider if you don't need to send those refresh signals to your UI. If you do, there's change notifier provider. Now there are a number of different providers available to you. There are different ways other than the provider.of method for bringing providers into your widget. There's a lot to explore here. This is a very valuable package. It is the most popular third-party package in the last quarter for Flutter. So provider's not going anywhere. So if you haven't dove into it yet, hopefully this video has given you some confidence to do that. And if it has, please like, subscribe. If there's things you're still struggling with, just let me know down there in the comments and we will try to get to them when I can. No promises. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Take care.